Good evening. We're back in open session. We just had an executive session pertaining to Kaplan versus Town of Acton, which is the challenge to our CPA funding or grants of funds to religious institutions. Anyhow, there was a decision at the Supreme Judicial Court earlier this year, and now we were discussing next steps. Anyhow, first item of business on our agenda is always citizens' concerns. Anybody in the audience who wants to raise an issue that is not on our agenda, you can approach the microphone. Please identify yourself and your street address. Just the street. You don't have to give full address. We're not going to go track you down, so thanks. You have to push the button on the base, yeah.
My name is Carolyn Dittis. I live on Tuttle Drive in Acton. And I'm very concerned about the proposed 31-bedroom condo project that is proposed for Kelly Corner. There are very many concerns that we have about this, including the safety of the seniors with so much crowding in that area and the traffic. But the one thing I would like to speak to is the wetlands issue. And I moved to Tuttle Drive 20 years ago, and there were several areas on that street that they said it's wetlands, it will never be developed, never, because it's wetlands. And now there are many houses on that area where they said there were wetlands. And one in particular, the people bought it a couple of years ago for $750,000, and they proceeded to have major flooding in their basement after they bought the house, and they're suing the developer. And this is a problem with people, all the waivers and people building on wetlands. So there are other people here that are going to speak to other issues of this proposed development, but we have major concerns. The whole neighborhood has a problem with this proposed development.
Thank you. I would just note that any time there's a proposed development within the jurisdiction of the Conservation Commission, the Commission has to review. And at least in recent memory, there should be no construction in wetlands. Okay, in wetlands, there may be on the periphery. There's a 100-foot buffer zone, but you know, and then there is the issue of cumulative impact of all this development generally in town, whether or not there are wetlands. But thank you.
Okay, so so this is all right? I don't have to touch anything? All right, so my name is Maureen Ryan Friend. I live on Tuttle Drive. I live at 40 Tuttle. And a couple of comments. It's all about 446 Mass Ave. I just became aware of this, my bad. Apparently this has been in the works for over a year. So, but I did watch the 319 meeting that you had and noticed that there wasn't any diversity in opinion, and maybe there was earlier on, but I really think it's great to have all the affordable housing for the elderly. We need it, I know. For the disabled, I know. But that is a terrible place for it, right in front of the junior high. You've got McCarthy Town, you've got Miriam, you've got Colebrook School, you got the high school, you got the junior high, and it's all coming through that corridor. And, you know, it looks good from a paper perspective, but when you have to drive through that section of town 3 or 4 times a day, all of this development, and I understand you're going to be talking about more density. I came here 20 years ago to get out of density, and here you're building it up. But so a couple of things. So communication, I know that when a building goes up, you have to notify the abutters, but I would argue that that part of Massachusetts Avenue is a special situation, and it's not sufficient just to notify the abutters. I'm not an abutter, but I'm driving that road all the time. And you know, one of the things next year that I'll look at, or the next time I'll look at for the selectmen, is where you all live, because I think it's easier for you to say, put everything there, because you might not drive through that every day. We have to drive through it every day. So do realtors have to tell people who come to Acton, oh, by the way, we're building density in the area you're buying in? You know, is that fair? So I think communication is lacking in this situation. And I just wanted to add some diversity of opinion, because I think this whole process has gone through assuming that because it's a great idea, I'm for it, you know, 100% affordable housing, great, just not there. So I ask if you guys have exhausted, you know, all of the other options for that development. So thank you.
I would add that that's a special project because of the complex funding. It is all for low-income rentals, and so the approval process is probably going to take years, and there will be other public information sessions, and you should be paying attention so that you'll have an opportunity to weigh in with your opinions. That's people pay attention to our schedule and they learn about these things, and then you look at the calendar on our town website. You can set up, you can arrange to get notified about anything that's posted on our town website. If you're interested in knowing about bids and all that sort of thing, you can learn about almost anything if you submit your email address and you're notified. I mean, that's a good way to keep connected. It's very hard for the town to reach out to all 22,000 people in town, make sure that they're aware of something that's going on. At some point, adults have to sort of take responsibility for, you know, beyond the legal communication obligations for keeping themselves informed. And
Okay.
we do our best, but
Okay.
it's apparently not good enough for you, so.
Yeah, what's the appropriate procedure to either get on the agenda, or do we just wait until it comes up? So we'll just have to monitor all the meetings next time it comes up, or do we go to the zoning board? What would be our procedure to communicate our feelings about it?
Well, at this point, I don't know that the project's going to be coming back to the Board of Selectmen.
Okay.
Probably the next place it will end up is the Zoning Board of Appeals.
Okay.
If you communicate with the Planning Department, they're generally the ones who are aware of developments like that.
Okay.
And could keep you apprised, figure out a way that's practicable.
Okay.
That could keep you informed.
And one of the things about that development, too, that kind of piggybacks on Carolyn, and I'll shut up, is talk about the wetlands. Every time there's a 40B, they build into the wetlands. I was part of fighting a 40B 10 years ago because they wanted, and one of the minor things that they wanted to go into the wetlands. This one wants to go in the wetlands. It wants to build the bottom floor. It's 3 stories high. They want to build the bottom floor into the ground. And, you know, what are they doing to make sure it doesn't flood like our neighbor? So, thank you.
Thank you. I have to read a legal notice. We have a hearing at 7:10 p.m. And then we can go back if there are any other citizens' concerns. The Acton Board of Selectmen will hold a public hearing on April 23, 2018 at 7:10 p.m. in the Francis Faulkner Hearing Room in Town Hall, 472 Main Street, Acton, on the application of Eversource for a grant of 1 stub pole installation on Martin Street, westerly side, approximately 447 feet north of Stowe Street. The application and accompanying plans can be inspected at Town Hall during normal business hours. First of all, are there any more citizens' comments about matters that are not on our agenda? Okay, what does everybody, can everybody just bring up the issues briefly? Because this is really not for general discussion. You can bring up issues and then we can address them offline if you need to. Just hold on. And then we'll have an uninterrupted discussion of your proposed project.
Okay, so
Yeah. Could you just wait and let me hear from, because we don't usually take citizens' concerns once we've moved past into the agenda quickly. Thank
So
you.
you're the same issue as the last person, right? I'm a different issue, so why?
Okay, recite your name clearly so that the recording secretary can get it down, and also your street. Thank you.
Yeah, my name is Vishnu. So I live at Jamie's Way, which is like Massa. It's a new development. So I live next to this development that is coming up at 446 Massa. So we missed somehow the earlier meetings of this development. So the number of units, I mean, we are not against building affordable units or senior housing, but the question is the way it is being built, it's like 0.89 acres of land, and we are trying to build like 31 units, 31 single, I think 1-bedroom units. It's a lot of units for that kind of land. I think by doing this, I think there is an impact both to the, surrounding neighborhood by the size of this building. It doesn't anywhere fit with the next neighborhood buildings. And it also affects the safety of both the people who are going to live there and the kids across the school. There are so many kids every day across that road. And if we add another like 31 units, which is like another like 60 cars getting in and out of the street, and then since they are seniors, there could be like, more caretakers and ambulances coming in out and going. So that's going to cause a lot of, safety issues for both kids and the seniors and everyone. And the other thing is this particular construction is really encroaching the wetlands, so it needs to be.
Can I interrupt, because I see a line forming, and you really need to, I would appreciate it if you address things that previous speakers have not brought up to keep things efficient. If people have brought up traffic concerns, the fact that it's across the street from the junior high, the encroachment on wetlands, the number of units, if you have something new to bring up.
Something new, like we just moved to Acton.
You were adding your voice to the objections to the project and concerns about the project.
So we just moved to Acton last summer, assuming that, they don't build something like this here, and it will be peaceful for us to live there as well. And now this thing coming in, whatever this big structure coming right next to my place, so our living would be really, really affected with this. So we'll not have any privacy with this three-story thing going up, whatever next to us. And the parking is right next to my house. So all the cars, the lights, everything is going to come. So we'll be more than affected than anyone else. That's one of.
So you're speaking as an abutter.
Yes, I am an abutter.
Did you get a legal notice?
I think I did.
Yeah, and where were you?
I don't know, since we just moved
For the
in, we have
public
some
meeting,
mailing
yeah.
issues.
No,
Yeah.
and this is, what I mean, in your case, you're in a abutter, you had a certain legal right to be notified, but, one of the things you have to do is then, look into it. And there was a public outreach session.
I know, we missed it, that's why we want to bring it up again to your notice. And we are requesting, is there a possibility for reconsideration of another hearing on this topic, because so many people have concerns? And a lot of people couldn't come today.
There will be, as I said, this is going to probably take 2-3 years because of the complexity of the funding. It's a lot of state grants, and they have certain conditions attached to them. So it could take longer than some of the more multifamily developments. So, but, just keep your eyes on our agenda. If you have a question, call the planning board and find out what the status is of that particular project. They're probably the best ones. We could probably tell you or direct you to somebody, but planning department is typically the department that keeps track of all of the developments in town.
I don't know, my question was, can we bring it back to the Board of Selectmen? Because
It won't be back before the Board of Selectmen. If there's going to be a public hearing, it will be before in some other forum. So.
Okay, thank you.
Our role in it is very limited. We just hear at the very beginning. All of the details of the project will get worked out in a different forum. So.
Yeah, I know. The reason I'm asking is most of the people who have concern with this were never aware of this issue. So as an abutter, I had to tell them that this is coming. Otherwise, nobody knew about it. So since most of them missed, so I'm just asking if there is a chance again for us to bring it back to the Board of Selectmen so that you can hear the concerns, and then again maybe whatever decision happens.
Well, thank you for that comment. As I said, it's probably not going to come back to us anytime soon. So.
Okay.
Okay.
Hello. I'm Dr. Kim Caston, 294 Pope Road, and I'm here with a comment about Nagog Pond. And it's something I'd like to say tonight rather than on Thursday. So as you know, I've been advocating in public talks around Concord and Acton, in the newspaper and on the Green Acton website, in favor of a sharing arrangement where the water from Nagog Pond would be shared amongst the towns that have legal rights to the pond, rather than going 100% or 96% to one of the towns. And as a consequence of these talks, I was invited to go speak to the Littleton Water Department. So this afternoon I met with Scott Edwards, who's the general manager of the Littleton Water Department, Keith Bergman, who's the town administrator, and Corey Gaudry, who's the environmental analyst, and this was at their invitation. So we had an interesting conversation. I was impressed by their long planning horizon. They're looking 10 to 30 years out into the future. I was impressed by their proactive approach to protecting their water rights. But one of the things that came up that I wasn't familiar with was that in October of 2017, the Littleton Water Department sent a letter to the Acton Water Department, which was then forwarded to the Board of Selectmen, inviting Acton to participate in discussions about the allocation protocol for water withdrawals from NAGOG. They wanted to have an Acton to Littleton conversation about this matter back in October, and this didn't happen. And I'm just basically here bringing a message from the Littleton Water Department that the invitation is still open. They would really like to have this conversation. They think that this is something that they should be doing before they go forward with their petition to the Supreme Judicial Court. Speaking as a concerned citizen of Acton, I really, really think it would be a great idea to enter into this kind of town-to-town conversation and open up the possibility of sharing water, in this case between Acton and Littleton. Right now, as you well know, they're about to submit their filings to the Supreme Judicial Court to protect their own access to the waters of Nagog Pond under the laws of 1884. We're at risk of being, third in line behind both Concord and Littleton. And I also wanted to point out just one more thing, which was that this request of theirs to have this conversation was very much in line with what Acton Town Meeting in 2017 resolved when we asked the Board of Selectmen in a non-binding resolution to engage with the town of Littleton and other stakeholders to reach an accord on equitable access to water from Nagog Pond. So the invitation is open. They really want to talk to you, and I would urge you to please take them up on it.
Ms. Caston, let me just say that Littleton, we are aware of that inquiry. The trouble is that Littleton was not going to include Concord in those discussions. I think that people on this board, the town manager and I in particular, who got the inquiry, would have been open to having discussions among the three towns, representatives of the three towns. But at the time last fall, it was strictly going to be Littleton and Acton representatives, and we just thought that was inappropriate given that we're involved in active litigation with Concord. So,
well,
okay.
Thank you for the clarification. I'm in favor of sharing the water amongst the towns that have legal rights to it. I guess I'd be open to an Acton Littleton share or a three-way share. I just think that it would be a mistake for us to allow it to go forward as a 100% to another town which is not Acton. So anyway, I'll just I have a copy of the letter. And,
Yeah. We received that through different channels. So, yes, sir. Quickly.
Yep. Hi. Chris Starr, 6 Littlefield Road. I'm here actually to talk about the Kelly's Corner Improvement Initiative. On April 2nd, 2018, town meeting members rejected Article 9. This attempt to appropriate another $500,000 in more engineering costs, basically pretty pictures designed to sell the public on what they need. And why did it fail? Because I feel and we feel that the public wasn't fully consulted in this kind of top-down government planning process. Perhaps it was because the planners failed to recognize the importance of key issues to our community. The plan didn't protect local businesses, preserve the positives of the current streetscape, like the old growth trees that line the roadway today, doesn't properly consider the pedestrian safety issues and begs for faster traffic and expanded curb-to-curb distances. These changes would forever change the character of Kelly's Corner, and not necessarily for the better, and spend millions of tax dollars in the process. I've seen this scenario actually play out in Belmont, where they spent $17 million, almost a similar amount as what they're asking for Kelly's Corner. Can't see much difference today, but however, you could see the pain that the local businesses went through, the years of construction that tore up the streets and made Belmont's primary commerce district into a war zone. Businesses perished as the state contractors got rich off of poorly constructed sidewalks that were pedestrian tripping hazards after a single winter of freeze and thaw, which is true. Now, many local businesses are trying to recoup the losses of 2 years of construction. In Belmont, the same stoplights are bottlenecks, the same bicyclists go up and down the street dodging trolley rails in the pavement, and those trolley rails weren't eliminated because it would cost too much. Now, but surprise, surprise, the rails under the pavement are wreaking havoc on the surface of the street. Now, a little after a year, the street needs repaving. Of course, Kelly's Corner doesn't have trolley rails, but it has its own set of unique local problems that need to be addressed locally, not through a bureaucratic state-run process where the state and federal money is the tail that wags the dog. Sadly, the town's plan doesn't protect the existing local businesses and property owners and favors large multinational corporations like Verizon and Kmart. Given the option to take a small amount from those corporate giants, the planners decided to pick on the little guys, the Bueno Isano, the Bolodrome. We're just trying to make a living. The local planning department and the 2020 committee have tried to pay lip service to being business friendly, but have not truly engaged the local businesses and property owners. The property owners were told long ago, as I was at public meeting, that it didn't matter what we thought. They would just take our land and we'd have to fight about it in court later. And that's a direct quote. Affected property owners tried to discuss alternatives, but we met with a shrug and a scoff. Make no mistake, the citizens of Acton and property owners in Kelly's Corner want to see the area improved for the benefit of us all. However, town meeting voters clearly did not share the same vision as town planners. While the proposed wider streets and faster traffic patterns will promote regional traffic, they also bring congestion in bike lanes that serve mostly out-of-towners. And I heard that spoken many times at town meeting.
Are you almost done?
I'm almost done.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair. I thought this was a public process.
Well, usually citizens' concerns are brief. People bring up,
Okay.
you obviously have something you wish to vent,
Yeah,
and you're doing that.
I've been through a few years of this.
And I think
so.
that, there are people on our board who were involved with the Kelly's Corner Committee who
Yeah.
would beg to differ with your characterization
Sure.
of the whole process as being very
Well,
bureaucratic and inconsiderate of local businesses. But please continue and finish. Bear in mind, we have an appointment that's supposed to start at 7:10.
Okay, thank
we're
you,
still
Madam Chair.
ticking.
Yes, as you say, it is a public process. Make no mistake, the citizens of Acton and the property owners in Kelly's Corner want to see the area improved, and they do. However, town meeting members clearly did not share the same vision. That vision, they want to see incremental improvements in Kelly's Corner, eventually not, and they don't want to see the changes at the expense of what is important from a local standpoint, the vibrancy of Kelly's Corner small businesses and the historic nature of the streetscape. Our planners have ignored many local concerns, and even as we've heard them repeatedly voiced throughout the years, most troublesome, they didn't consider the fundamental impacts that needed to be considered in making the decision to deploy $15 million in taxpayer money that will make Kelly's Corner into a war zone during the multi-year construction process and leave businesses decimated in the wake of the project with unnecessary and ill-considered takings proposed. This is unacceptable. We propose a more collaborative approach rather than a top-down approach. We need a planning process that fully engages the public and the stakeholders in Kelly's Corner, while the government needs to be involved and should not operate in a vacuum. State and federal money might be a part of the funding solution, but it shouldn't be the tail that wags the dog. And I'm sorry for using that metaphor twice. But rather see a lower cost, local-based approach that reaps the low-hanging fruit. And I think actually, Madam Chair, you talked about the low-hanging fruit when it came to traffic changes, that reaps the low-hanging fruit, not a massive overhaul that is likely to be unrecognizable when it's complete, like the project that was implemented in Belmont. And I'm going to conclude. In the meantime, we are recommending that the Department of Transportation move the project from the TIP funding list until these critical local issues are addressed. And this plan is truly ready for prime time. The local options to self-fund this should be fully explored, and the effects on local businesses, local landowners, pedestrians, and streetscape should be fully vetted before we move forward. The town meeting vote underscored that local concerns run deep, and there's no true mandate locally for this specific initiative. I'm hoping this board will table this project until all options are explored, particularly those that keep the control in local hands and focus on local needs. Thank you.
Who is we? You mentioned we. Who are you speaking for?
I'm speaking for a number of people that I've talked to at town meeting, after town meeting. If I'm a single voice,
No,
then
that's
my
fine,
apologies.
that's fine. I didn't know if you were
Madam
speaking
Chair.
for some sort of a group, but I would just note that the
Well-
vote at town meeting was close. You say that the voters didn't want, a good number of them did want to approve the project, but it just failed because you need a 2/3 vote. It just failed by, a fairly small number of votes. I think that the government, when you refer to the government can be involved, the government is the people,
Yes.
People like us represent the public. We're not just some sort of, unfeeling, uncaring bureaucracy. We are actually representatives of the public, and the town staff members are charged with helping to implement what the public wants, okay? So don't treat the government, don't make the mistake of saying the government is sort of some sort of entity up here that has nothing to do with us. We empower the government, okay? It's your government. And as I said before, I think that this is not the first go-around with Kelly's Corner.
Sure.
Obviously, I think the problem is that we can't get everybody on the same page. So any proposal that has come across the desk or shown up at town meeting has not met with the approval of everybody in town, because everybody has a different idea of what we should do there. So, and maybe it will just stay the way it is, and people will just complain about it the way they do about bad weather in New England. But anyhow, thank you.
And thank you, and I'm going to submit my
Sure,
letter. So.
sure. You can give it to, if you have something for the record, you could give it to Lisa. Thank you. Yeah. Sir.
Yes, my name is Suresh Tamadun, and I live on Prospect Street, right near the Jewish temple.
Okay.
So I've been there about 10 years. I've seen the past 2-3 years the sewage drain. There are 2 sewage drains, both sides of the road, and in the heavy rain, as we see these days, heavy storms, they get sometimes clogged up, sometimes not clogged up. There's heavy flooding there, and it's been markedly high past 2-3 years. And I've just realized that it's partly because of the construction that happened right opposite to us, which is the proposed site opposite to 146 Prospect Street. There's a historical house which has been, the whole thing has been replaced by a whole many dwelling construction, and that has built up concrete on the floor, tar and concrete all built up space. There is no more soaking of the rainwater, And this thing happened also at when the Jewish temple expanded some time ago, and it's gotten worsened. So now I didn't realize, I didn't hear about this senior living facility being built until very recently, because I was never given a notice, so I was living downstream from there. I'm very concerned that the flooding is going to get much worse, and not just for me. The flooding means the water comes through my private road straight into my property, deep down, and it goes to the neighbors as well. So it just floods the whole area, and it's going to get worse. And I'm very concerned that this matter was not considered before, and if we had known, we would have obviously come earlier. So I'm respectfully requesting that you ask Board of Select's approval for this senior housing building development be reconsidered. Whether we could put in the agenda another time, and if we could reconsider, that'll be really helpful.
I assume when you say sewage drains, you're talking about the stormwater drains?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's a difference.
Okay,
Yeah,
sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah,
It
that's
just-
what I meant.
It just
stormwater.
sewage, I think of, well, anyhow, never
Yeah, I
mind.
believe there is sewage
There
too.
there is sewering in, parts of Kelly's Corner, but,
Right, there is.
yeah, stormwater are the
No,
drains,
that's correct,
yeah.
that's correct. I'm sorry, yeah,
Okay,
that's what.
no, that's all right. It's a technical thing, and,
Yeah.
yeah, I've had to learn the
Yeah.
terms myself, but thank you.
Yeah,
All right, well, take it under advisement, what you said.
Yeah, thanks.
Tara Fredericks, West Acton. I have a couple questions and a comment. Is there paper agendas available for the public, Lisa? Do you know? They're over there now, I guess. Okay, thanks. Thank you for mentioning the concept of cumulative impacts. I appreciate that. Relative to this 31 unit, can people raise their hands if they're here because they're concerned about that? Just to let you know. It's my understanding that the Board of Selectmen voted to send in a letter of support for the project. And it's also my understanding that legally you can rescind that letter of support. So I think what they're asking for is to have an item on the agenda to reconsider that letter of support. I want to just let people know about the Kmart proposal. 80% was for the appraisal, and we're hoping that the Board of Selectmen will do that. I personally went to the EDC, figuring that would be a great place to start, that I feel like whatever happens at that property, I think that the support of the EDC is very important. And it looks like a couple of us are going to be developing a proposal for the EDC to consider. So if anybody wants to get involved, please let me know. votefortara@gmail.com. And then with the Kelly's Corner, I really urge you to allow or encourage or facilitate a lo-fi design collaboration to occur by the stakeholders that are right in that intersection to sit at a table and figure out what they want. And I also urge that apparently the state is waiting to get a letter from you relative to what you think the town of Acton should do relative to the Kelly's Corner infrastructure funding. And I hope that you have a public meeting regarding that. And I also hope that you say that you want the people's needs in Acton to be accommodated before capacity, because the first letter of support went and it said that you're interested in capacity of getting the most cars through so that's that. And I hope that happens in public, because apparently the water talk invitation, I remember that discussion being held in the public forum. And then my last mention is the FEMA maps. So the FEMA maps are often modified by town staff and then proposed to town meeting. And so there's last time the FEMA maps got modified per town meeting, there's a new trend, because that's happening all over the country. There's a new trend called observable flood maps. And that's where the town constructs the flood maps based on the flooding that they know happens, even if it's not reflected on the FEMA maps. So thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. Are there any other public comments before we resume?
Yes. One last thing.
I shouldn't have asked.
Oh, thank you. You mentioned that the staff does what the town wants. And in the first phase 0 of the Acton 2020 planning, there was a survey that occurred of over 2,000 people. By and large, the most important thing they didn't want more of was construction. Yet when the plan came out, construction was the most used word. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. I think we're going to go back to our, gosh, I don't even remember what this was involving anyhow, Eversource. Is somebody from Eversource still here? I hope so. Thank you very much for your indulgence. That is very unusual for us to start the first item on our agenda. It usually is 5 minutes, if that. I'll do this, and after that, I will do my chairman's update, because you've been waiting here a while. We'll take you out of order, because you've been waiting very patiently. And so the floor is yours.
Christine Crosby, Eversource Energy, and we are requesting permission for a grant of location to install a new stub pole on Martin Street. It's pole number 34/12S. The purpose of this pole would be to provide additional support to the existing pole line that's out there due to the construction, some pole replacements for the new subdivision, Anthem Village.
Comments, question from the board? Peter?
I've seen this term before. Can you explain what a stub is?
Yes, a stub pole is, it's a pole that is usually installed across the street from a pole that has the potential to lean. And what we do is we install a guy wire. It's not like an electrical cable or wire. It's a guy wire that's attached from the pole to the pole that would be leaning to the other pole across the street to support it, to stable it.
Okay, so it doesn't actually carry any electric wires. It's
No.
just stabilizing the other
Yep.
pole. Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? We have a motion? Audience members?
Then I will move to approve the application for Eversource for stub pole installation on Martin Street.
Second. Katie moves and Joan seconds. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very much. All right, I'm going to do my chairman's update, and then we're going to go to board business. I'm going to formally welcome John Benson again to the board. This is our first regular board meeting since the local elections on March 27th and the 2018 annual town meeting. We had several meetings right after annual town meeting pertaining to the town manager interviews, and he joined us for all of those meetings, and I did welcome him at one of those meetings, but this may have a much bigger audience, so I'll make it official and welcome you on board. About the town manager search, the Board of Selectmen did interview, for those of you who haven't been paying attention to what we've been doing past month, we did interview 4 excellent finalist candidates for the town's next town manager on Saturday. Yes, we work on Saturday, April 7th, and on Monday, April 9th, we voted unanimously to offer the position to John Mangiarotti, who currently is the deputy town manager in Andover and previously was the assistant town manager in Westford, where he started out in GIS and overlapped a bit with Steve Ledoux, who was the Westford town manager at the time and whom he will be succeeding. He has just completed a detailed background check. We are in the process of negotiating the employment agreement. The Board of Selectmen, all of us are delighted that we had such a fine slate of finalists to pick from, and we're really looking forward to working with him when he comes on board. Mr. Ledoux is still with us, maybe not too thrilled about it, but he's still with us until June 30th, through June 30th. I'm not sure when John will be joining us, but anyhow, thanks again to the Town Manager Search Committee, whose members the Board of Selectmen collectively selected and appointed to engage in what was an 8-month search, screening a lot of candidates and whittling down the list to the 4 people that we had the pleasure of interviewing. Patriots Day was Monday, the 16th. It was also the running of the Boston Marathon, and you couldn't have asked for worse weather. It was cold, rainy, and the temperature was in the 30s. Concord canceled the battle reenactment at the North Bridge and their local parade, but the Acton Minutemen, led by Captain Steve Crosby, marched. They were swathed in ponchos and carrying muskets in special plastic sleeves. And in being so intrepid, they helped to make a dream come true through the Make-A-Wish Foundation for 14-year-old John McConnell of Anchorage, Alaska, who has muscular dystrophy and traveled with his parents to join the march from Barrett's Mill Farm in Concord to the North Bridge, where there was a special reenactment with him doing the drum roll to sort of get everybody started for John's benefit. There were Acton, Stowe, Sudbury, and Lexington Minutemen companies, plus 2 British regiments. This is a great illustration of reaching across the aisle, and is there any chance that Congress will take heed? Acton Cleanup Week is this week. It actually started Saturday, April 21st. It continues through Sunday, April 29th. You can go to actoncleanup.info to sign up for a street section and get more information about where to get the bags. Some of them are at the library, and where to leave the full bags. The Acton Boxborough Cultural Council will have its annual film series starting this Friday and continuing for 3 more Fridays in May at 7 o'clock in this room. It's free admission. This Friday, there will be short films by Massachusetts filmmakers, often including students in the various film schools in the area. On May 4th, there will be a Japanese film, Tampopo, which is referred to as a noodle Western comedy featuring a widow and her ramen noodle shop and her determination to make the best ramen noodles ever. On the 11th of May, there will be Chocolat, which is actually a British film, but it's set in France, featuring a woman, her daughter, and their chocolate shop in a small French village. More food. And finally, on May 18th is Yellow Submarine, which needs no introduction to most people, a British animated feature celebrating its 50th anniversary. And finally, the League of Women Voters will be continuing their speaker series on the role of the press in our democracy next Wednesday, May 2nd, and Tuesday, May 8th, 7 o'clock at the Blanchard Library in Boxborough. On the 2nd of May, Dorothy Kramer, who's a professional librarian, will provide her perspective on various issues, including fake news, net neutrality, and how to provide the tools for consumers and purveyors of news to be well informed. And on May 8th, Dan Kennedy, who probably most of us are familiar with, who's a Northeastern journalist professor and also a longstanding regular on WGBH's Greater Boston and Beat the Press, will be the featured speaker. Finally, the Board of Selectmen will be having a reopened hearing about Nagog Pond this coming Thursday, the 26th at 7 p.m. in this room, to consider proposed changes to our March 2017 decision. This is a different set of changes from the ones for which we held a reopened hearing last November and failed to get sufficient votes. But, Mr. Manager, that's it for me.
I'll pass.
All right, next item up, and I'm really looking forward to this, is board reorganization. All right, I nominate Katie Green for chairman for the coming year.
Second.
No, you don't have to second. I think
Oh,
you just,
okay.
Katie, you do the rest of the nominations. I would suggest that we just vote the slate.
Vote this, okay, then I will nominate Joan Gardner as vice chair, and I will also nominate John Benson as clerk.
Are there any other nominations? If none, I will close the nominations, and we will vote on the proposed slate. Katie for chairman, Joan for vice chairman, John for clerk for the coming year. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, abstaining. Okay.
Now we do shuffle. Okay, thank you. So I will move on to the next item on our agenda, which is the Volunteer Recognition Award discussion. So Peter, I think that is you, so I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, we're going to be hopefully very brief about this item. May 11th, as part of the volunteer recognition reception at the town that Selectmen put on at Nara Park, begun last year. We are going to hand out awards to our great volunteers who have shown exemplary commitment to town service over the years. The Colonel Francis Faulkner Senior Award for exemplary volunteer service. Each selectman will pick a candidate to present the award to. Lisa has given us a mock-up of the town plaque, the plaque that will go in Town Hall that has the title of the award at the top, and we'll have individual little names that of people who receive the award. We'll be giving out a certificate and a little honorarium, an honorarium, not a financial one, but a picture of the town, line drawing of the town center to each one of the recipients of the awards. There's a couple of things I wanted to bring up. One is Lisa now has 4 names, I believe, of recipients. Right, 4. Well, I emailed Chin Sung, and we have not heard back from him. The proposal going forward in the future is to nominate the candidates before the annual town election so that we have all the members of the board involved. Chin Sung has not gotten back to me. I don't feel like chasing him particularly. He was aware this was going on. John Benson has been on many town boards, the Community Preservation Committee, the FinCom, and the Kelly's Corner Committee. And so if the board feels it's appropriate, I would recommend that John pick a candidate as well. So we have 5 members giving out awards. Okay? So we'll go with that. The only other thing I want, and I've been working with Mark Hall, did yeoman's work last year, getting the food there and helping us prepare. Kathy Faulkner from the Recreation Department, make sure that the tables are all set up. Lisa is working on ordering the food and getting the certificates together and getting the plaque together and the pictures framed that we'll hand out. So we're all set to go. I would recommend that people call whoever they've nominated and tell them, make sure they can be there May 11th and invite their family to come along. And we might want to announce at the next Selectmen's meeting before May 11th who we picked for these awards. The only other thing I could think of is there's 2 particularly sterling volunteers in town who passed away, Dory Hunter and Brewster Conant. And I don't know if we want to think about doing something like let's see, an emeritus award or something for people who meet that very, very high standard. It may be too late in the game to decide that. We could do it next year, but anyway, that's just a thought I had. So.
Yes, Ms. Dashi.
I like this. I like being over here. It's so much easier. The stress is just rolling off my shoulders anyhow. But no, I have a question, Peter. You said to make sure we notify the nominees. Should we notify their chairman? This came up at one of my liaison committees. They were talking about the volunteer recognition thing. Well, are you going, Janet? Are you going? Well, yeah, I have to go. But anyhow, and I knew that I had nominated one of their members, and I didn't want to say it right there, but I think it would be good for the committee to know at some point. We can notify the nominees and then maybe at some point notify the committee members or the chairman at least, so that some of the committee members show up at the year-end thing. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. That makes sense to me.
All right, so any other questions or anything, Lisa, that you need from us to move forward, or Peter? Okay, otherwise, thank you very much for putting this together, and we're really looking forward to the event. So, and just to all the volunteers out there who are hopefully listening, we hope to see many of you at the event. We, like Peter mentioned, we did the first one last year, and it was really great, and hopefully we'll have the same kind of nice weather again this year. So, we will see.
There was one thing that came across the email chain that the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail dedication is that afternoon. I'm hoping that it's early enough in the day so it won't interfere.
I think it was at 3.
We're meeting at...
It's 3 o'clock, and I think Kathy is aware of it, sort of coordinating that with, yeah.
She said
We can handle it? Okay, perfect.
Okay.
Hopefully there'll be a lot of people there
Another
who
great
will want
event
to
to
stay.
attend. Our beautiful, years-long, very expensive, the town had to design it, Bruce Freeman Rail Trail. So I understand it's being used extensively already. So it's being kicked off on May 11th.
Great. Okay, next up is the cable licensing renewal negotiations. Steve, do you want to talk about this? Is there somebody from the Cable Advisory Committee here tonight? Sure. Yes, okay. Do you mind just coming up?
Oleg Volinsky, Durkee Road, Cable Advisory Committee Chair. As you know, Cable Advisory Committee advises town and Board of Selectmen on matters pertaining to cable licensing. We have 2 licenses right now that expire. One is Comcast license expiring in June 28th, 2020, and Verizon license expiring October 2nd, 2021. It sounds like quite a bit ways away, but as some of you may know, the licensing process does take several years. It's not unusual to have 2 or 3 year process. Because of that, the committee recommends to retain attorney for the license negotiation, and the committee recommends to reach out to William H. Solomon specifically to retain him for license negotiations. So Bill Solomon, as most of us know him, was involved in previous license negotiations. He was involved, I think, even the original AT&T license, I think, even. So he's been involved with town quite a bit. He is a very experienced gentleman in the matters of town municipal licenses. And as I said, he helped us negotiate one of the best licenses in the state, as many of us feel. Getting him on board early on will help us to develop strategy early on for negotiating license going forward. And we as a committee recommend that town manager reach out to Bill Solomon and negotiate terms of his service.
Mr. Manager, I know you have some comments. I know you've tried to reach out to him.
Well, actually, he emailed me about 5 o'clock this morning. I did get a little nervous because a week or so, I tried to get a hold of him for about a week, and he was on vacation. But what made me nervous is when I Googled him, he actually had retired as town council in Stoneham, but it wasn't clear from the article if he retired as his private practice. So the good news is he is available, he is interested, and we're going to talk at 1:30 tomorrow.
Okay, great. Any questions, Ms. Aducci?
I was just going to move that we authorize the town manager to engage Mr. Solomon in a possible negotiation of these renewals on behalf of the town. So.
Any other questions or comments from board members? Any comments or questions from the audience? Yes.
Hi, Tara Fredericks, West Acton. I was just going to note that I was on the team of people who negotiated that contract, and it was dubbed the best in the nation. So, and Bill did it. So, what Bill did is he went and gathered up all of the different, because we have special rights on our home rule state. He gathered up all of the recent licenses and took all of the best terms from all the licenses and put them all in one. So it was brilliant work. But I was going to ask that the board support the idea of putting in clauses regarding net neutrality. There are ordinances now in place around the country that people can rely on for statements relative to fairness in transacting the internet connection process. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, yes, sure.
The scope of cable licensing is pertaining to cable television. Internet is outside the scope of cable licensing. So we can discuss with Bill his opinion and get his kind of view, but general, as a committee member, we receive a lot of questions about internet access and different in internet service. As private citizens, we do our best to provide some guidance and recommendations. However, as a committee, the scope of license is pertaining to cable television, and internet is outside of that scope.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, we've got a motion and a second. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, great, thank you. And thank you very much, Oleg, for coming. Okay, up next is the Acton's application for housing choice designation under the Governor's Housing Choice Initiative. So Janet, do you want to take that?
All right, yeah, this was originally, when I was still chairman, it was proposed for consent, and I looked at it and I thought, no, I better take it off and be able to address it a little bit. The board, we got an inquiry from somebody asking about the Governor's Housing Choice Initiative and sort of confusing the pending legislation that the governor has introduced, which brings in some other issues. This is really nothing to do with the legislative proposal, which among other things would reduce the vote margin for certain kinds of zoning amendments from the usual 2/3 to majority. This is really a program that the governor's is starting up to try to encourage or basically reward communities that provide housing that's in a sustainable way, that's affordable. If you looked at the form that's in our packet, the questions are about past 5 years, how many housing units have you increased, if any, over what you had before, and also what are some of your best practices that the state is interested in seeing, that such as a housing production plan for affordable housing, increased units, and there are some other items that are in this list of practices that they're looking for that they want to encourage. If you are designated as under this program, as the town is hoping to be qualified to do, then you are eligible for an array of state grants, and it's not just about housing, it's just any state grants that are out, or a large, vast swath of grants that are out there, not just particular to housing. And so that's why we're doing things that this program already is trying to incentivize, and so why not get some grant money, because we're doing what they want to motivate us to do. I mean, the governor has announced that there's a need to increase housing units in the state, and so they're doing different things to try to encourage communities that are a little bit sort of lax in creating affordable housing to do that in different ways, and this is one of the things they're doing, but it's certainly not the only thing that they're trying to do to motivate people to add more. It's affordable or workforce housing that isn't hideously expensive, which a lot of housing in Acton is. So, but that's what this is for. It's all it is to authorize the town to submit this application, and we'll see. I don't even know if we'll actually qualify for designation, but it's worth trying because we have a lot of things that we're doing or have done already that suggest that we would be eligible. So.
Are there any questions or comments from board members? I'll just note, as Janet said, it's not approving or giving our stamp of approval anyway to the governor's legislation, but it is just taking advantage of being able to apply for grant programs based on the work that we already have done and are doing. And one of those I noticed grant programs was priority under the Complete Streets grant program, which we have utilized a lot. So I think it's worthwhile to apply for it. Any questions from the audience? Tara?
Yes. First of all, the claim that they aren't connected. I just want to, if you look at the press release from the governor's office, it says a new housing choice designation. And that's what you're applying for, is a designation. If you go to the bill, which if passed, would take away the 2/3 majority, the 2/3 vote at town meeting and move it to a 51%. It specifically says the Housing Choice Initiative as described in the message to the general court. And so that was the message from the general court. So I've asked the State House people to tell me if a community applies for this designation, are they then a smart growth target? And the answer says yes. And I said, but what does that mean? Does that mean then that if this bill is passed, that then the state would then automatically be able to designate areas of town to be the 51% vote? And the answer was, we don't know. So part of this issue was part of a memo that we sent to the town manager in January asking specific technical questions relative to 4075, which is now named 4290, this housing choice bill, and we didn't get any answers. So I feel like before we go applying for the designation that is specifically mentioned in the bill that reduces the town meeting vote from 2/3 to 51%, that we get some answers relative to how this impacts our legal rights as a town, our legal rights of town meetings. So if you guys are moving, as one person, a former selectman said, it sounds like, and not my words, that this is a small bit of cheese and grants to get into a big trap. And I was also informed that 40B started this way, with grants and designations and applications, and then it became opt-in and then became mandatory. So I urge you to reconsider sending in this application right away. Apparently there's going to be many rounds of the application. What does it mean relative to water? What does it mean relative to 4075 and the obligations that come with that? So I feel like it's more important. It's a more important thing to discuss, and I appreciate you taking it out of consent. I think it's something that needs to be put in the public and find out, to get the answers for what this actually means, what this application means, because they're calling it a smart growth target. They're saying a 40% increase of high-density housing, 40% increase in the growth rate, and I don't think that we can suffer that at a time that we don't even know if we have enough water for the build-out as it's planned to increase the build-out. By then, again, we don't even know how much because it's undefined, because these smart growth target areas have no restrictions or very low restrictions relative to zoning, and then any other changes would come before the board as a majority as opposed to a town meeting. So I think it's really important when you talk about before earlier that you do things that the town wants, that you check, have some hearings about this issue. This was put on rather unexpectedly as far as I was concerned, because I thought it quite a surprise since we were submitting questions. Green Acton had submitted questions that hadn't been answered, and then we highlighted the issue about the water and getting over the cumulative impacts would be over the state allowable water limit, that now to get some short money for grants to apply for this designation. So I urge you to take a step back on this. Thank you.
Tara, can I ask who you mean by when you said you reach out to State House people? Who do you mean specifically?
Yes, other representatives around the state that had concerns. I wrote into the housing...
Do you mean you reached out to our legislators? What do you mean by State House people?
I didn't get any answers from them. I wrote to the the Committee on Housing that was reviewing the 4075, which is 4290 now, which is the connected housing choice bill that's accompanying the whole thing. And committee members wrote back to me and said, we've gotten no answers, and I asked specific questions, got them on the phone, a couple of them were lawyers, and they said, we just don't know. And I'm saying,
you spoke to specific legislators?
I did.
Which ones?
I'm not prepared to tell you because I would have to check to see if it would be okay if I would disclose their names. But what I'm saying is that we don't seem to have the answers to some basic questions.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll note again that the legislation has not passed, and that knowing the legislative process, that there are two different bills that both the House and Senate are considering, and likely the governor's bill is not going to be the final bill that is passed. They will probably both pass separate bills that are then worked out in conference committee. So I wouldn't be referring to the governor's bill as sort of a fait accompli.
Oh, I was just worried about the
Janet,
designation,
okay.
if we apply for this designation.
Tara, I would ask you, when you talk about the reduction of the vote, the mandatory zoning change vote from 2/3 to majority, you can't say it's across the board in the governor's proposal. It's for certain discrete items. There's a list of them. If you look at the legislation, the law, which I have, and I included it in my email response to one person who wrote about this, it's not across the board.
No, I understand that.
Okay, and frankly, a lot of the things that are subject to the simple majority vote are things that kind of we're already doing or have done. So, I mean, it only applies if you decide as a town that you want to go that route and you want to propose a zoning change that under the governor's proposal, assuming it gets enacted into law, which is by no means certain because he's got competition from the Senate and the House, which have their own proposals, which frankly are probably going to be much more onerous where local control is concerned. I think that it's not by no means certain that his proposal is going to become law, or if it were part of it were to become law, it'd be very dramatically changed. You have to understand that the governor and the lieutenant governor both came from Board of Selectmen backgrounds, experience. They have tremendous respect for local control. And this is their proposal to try to restore, the legislative proposal was try to restore some of the local control to the local government that, frankly, the Senate and House proposals are not so respectful of. So, but don't say that it's 2/3 to majority vote across the board, because it isn't.
Madam Chair, may I respond since you suggested I hadn't read the bill?
Briefly, but I'm
Yes,
not,
I just want to read the bill.
You cannot read the entire bill.
No, I'm
not
sorry.
allow you to do that.
She's correct that it's not across the entire town. It's areas which would qualify, where the state would decide that that area qualifies for high-density mixed-use development.
It also would be on certain zoning changes and at the discretion of the town choosing to bring those forward. But again, we're not talking, that bill is not finalized, nor do I think it will be finalized in that format.
Okay, thank you, but applying for that designation, I think is either...
We're applying for the Housing Choice Initiative, which would allow us to apply for grants, and is not specifically, we're not supporting that legislation. So I would like to make that clear.
The application states specifically that we have an interest in more growth. It says that in the application itself, and it shows how we want more growth by citing master plan and citing all of these things and showing the CPA votes. And I think that that's important to bring to the public before you apply for this designation, because I think it's really important. That's how Chapter 40B started. The designation is the first step to get to be a target area as determined by the state. Thank you.
Anybody else? Danny?
Danny Factor, Davis Road, thank you. I just want to elaborate on a couple of items that have been mentioned here so far. First of all, when Tara talks about we asked Steve, the we that she's referring to was the Green Acton Land Use Committee, which we're both members of as directors of Green Acton, and this was an inquiry that was approved by the entire board of Green Acton, because we felt that not only with the governor's particular bill, but with a number of these bills that are being considered, there are definitely legal determinations that need to be made as far as what certain passages mean. And I do think that it would be premature to go forth asking for this designation when there is such a connection when to this term before we understand the legal ramifications. And I do think that Green Acton deserves to have a written reply to the questions that we have, and specifically Madam Chair talks about, yes, these bills do consider where you would allow these types of changes to be made in the law in certain categories, but a lot of the way that they define these categories are so vague. You have, for example, Part F, which is to allow denser development. Well, that's, anybody can say that they're making development denser, when you're adding, housing, for example. Mixed use development, again, there's not a complete formal definition of that, of that term as well. So these are some of the clarifications that we were asking about. So I think that this is a matter that should be tabled until we understand the ramifications more, and seeing that we never did get a response from town council. And I understand that there's a debate as to how connected this housing choice initiative is to bills that have been called housing choice initiative. But I think that there is enough of a connection that we don't understand the legal ramifications enough yet, and that the safer thing would be to table the item and look into it a little more. Thank you.
Thank you. Peter? Oh, you want to, okay. Kim?
Hi, I'm Kim Caston, 294 Pope Road, and the members of the Water Resources Advisory Committee are all over at the Acton Water Commissioners meeting, which is happening at the same evening, so they're not here to speak. But so I just am here to encourage you to please attend to their work that they're doing on the relationship between future growth and the water needs of the town, and be very cautious about committing to yet higher density. You saw the presentation that they made the other day showing the additional water needs that are anticipated from additional development that's already planned, and to add yet additional density on top of that just adds additional water demand on top of that. So please attend to their study as it comes and take that into account as you make this set of decisions.
Great, thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Jerry Lee from 34 Tuttle Drive, and I just would like to ask, how do you know that Acton residents want to be part of a high development town?
So we don't, and this is not committing us to be part of a high development town. It's entering a program that, again, is building off of work that we've already done. So we have a housing production plan that was part of a public process. We have a master plan that was part of a public process. And so those are the things that were reflected in our application for the things that we have done that are affordable housing, which is what this application is asking us for.
Is there no other way to have affordable housing other than to build? Or are there enough existing apartments in town that could be designated as affordable housing?
I'm not going to answer that question off the top of my head, but no, is the short
We've been there, done that. I mean, one of the issues, if you're looking at all the apartment complexes on Great Road, there are actually affordable units, but they don't count under the state's Chapter 40B law because they are not restricted. If you want to have something count as affordable unit, you have to have it deed restricted.
And
so,
why can't we have that be deed restricted?
because you'd have to buy them. You want the town to spend taxpayer money to buy all of the apartment and condo complexes on Great Road and deed restrict them. The town is not interested in being a landlord, so it would have to be, you'd have to have somebody else agree to own the properties and deed restrict them, and most landlords probably aren't going to be willing to do that unless they went into apartment management with the idea of providing affordable units.
And I'd also note that the entire state's in a housing crisis right now. And if you look at, there's been a lot of work done by a lot of entities to look at the lack of available housing for the number of people that currently live in this state. And we have a number of homeless people, and that's part of why. So we are in a housing crisis at the moment.
I'm Ping Liu at 8 Monument Place. So for the 100 apartment, what we see, like if you count Carlisle, they only have 30 units. There are 1,500 housing units in Carlisle. They only have 30 units of apartment. If you look at Concord only has 11% apartment, which they meet the 40B with one shot with the mill project. If you look at Boxborough, they have 2 apartment complexes. One just finished earlier last year. So they are well over 10% with only 2 apartment complexes with just one shot or 2 shots. We have over 30% apartment in Acton. So where we cannot meet, the 40B with one shot. Actually, Janet mentioned about, buying properties. Yes, we can do it. We can just buy 10 units a year. We only have 265 units need to meet the 10% 40B requirement. If we buy 10 units a year, we just buy 20 years. 20-something years, we finish for the cost. So apartment for 2-bedroom is 170,000. So we buy 10 units, 1.7 million. 1.7 million is only 2% of the property taxes, actually in Acton. So basically, we can spend $1 million to buy the riverside, the manufacturer, basically the deserted, property. We can spend $1 million. We cannot just spend, a couple millions a year to buy existing units. So if we buy the existing units, basically we can meet, 20 units a year. So that means, basically we have a fixed amount of apartment currently. If we don't build any more, and when we build more single-family houses, those prices will be higher. be higher. That means, the medium housing units price will be higher when you build, single-family houses. So one way, is like, as you know, the more apartment we build, the more taxes we need, because the tax collected from the apartment is much less than single-family unit. So when we have more and more apartment, that means we need to increase, taxes. For example, currently we have 600,000 for the median price. So with 2% tax, that's 12,000. When we have more and more apartment, that means the median price will go down. In order to get the same amount of tax revenue for a medium housing, that means we need to increase the tax rate significantly to have the same amount of tax revenue for medium price house. So basically I did a lot of calculation last couple of years based on the apartment units in Acton. Basically I could not sleep well. One thing, why we cannot learn from Carlisle, Concord, or Boxborough. They have very good strategy to do it. For example, Concord, they proposed a tax for new constructions, for they call it luxury tax, but they didn't pass last year. Basically, their purpose is like, okay, when you build 3,000 square foot new construction, they collect some more special one-time tax. So their estimate is like, for every year, they can collect, a couple million extra dollars. And what's the purpose to use the money? They just say, okay, they buy existing unit as a 40B. That means they never plan to build more and more high-density apartment. So that's a smart way to keep the property value, in good way. Also, that's a good way to keep the tax rate down. So that's my opinion. Thanks.
Thank you. Tara?
Tara Fredericks, West Acton. I just want to kind of correct what I thought was a misperception. The crisis is in the very and extremely low income housing, which is below $30,000 a year, and the housing choice is promoting below 80% AMI, which is $70,000, $80,000 a year, with no requirement to be below $30,000. So it's really not going to address the actual crisis, and the 2/3 of the current housing stock, the growth, is about 16,000 new permits a year in the state. About 2/3 of that is for people coming to the state that can actually afford to buy. So I wanted to just correct that. And then the deed restriction, we are planning to propose a new agency or a private entity that will come to the town to ask for the money to do deed restriction buy down. When I was running for office, Nancy Tavernier from ACHC says, why don't you have us do it or come to us and we'll see if that works out. If it does, that'd be great. But I think that there's a real opportunity to do things very creatively, to tax. There's called a transfer tax, which is enabled by state law, where every time a house changes hands, there's a tax that can go to pay for actual affordable housing that doesn't have to be built. So the idea of this designated, to try and designate us as a target for more growth for housing that we could take care of here very affordably, if not free, I think is a mistake. But I hope that you at least wait for some answers on the what the designation actually means. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, any comments or questions from board members?
I noticed this application is due April 30th.
Yes.
And we don't have a final bill?
Again, because the application isn't
It's a separate program.
represent on the
Yeah.
bill, so there are two separate programs.
Yeah,
So-
if you go to the website, they talk about the program, and then there's a reference to the legislation being part of it, but, they wouldn't be able to launch the program if they were, everything hinged on approval of the legislation. I mean, they might as well not. It's separate, so.
Any other questions or comments from board members? No?
I'm going to move the application, that we approve the application for housing choice designation under the Governor's Housing Choice Initiative.
Is there a second? Okay, I'm going to take the motion. I'll allow somebody to speak after it. So is there a second to the motion?
I'll second.
Okay, yes, sir, you may speak.
So actually, I wanted to talk about this application that you guys are making. So the result of collecting the grant money, what's the purpose of it? Is that to apply for more housing?
No, the grant funds that we would be allowed to apply for are numerous. They include things like the Complete Streets program, which we've used to build more bike lanes, to add bike lockers at the train station, to add repair stations for your bikes, as well as many other things. So there are a number of grant programs that you can apply for if you are part of this program, or that you would get preference in if you are part of this program.
So what I don't understand is that if the state is proposing or pushing for this, this kind of special money, state needs something in return. And obviously helping the towns is not what the state wants. So what is it that the state is wanting out of providing this money?
So again, in the application, we have to show ways that we have been supporting and do support the building of affordable housing. And again, our application right now focuses on things that we have already done or already do, which include things like having our housing production plan in place, as well as other initiatives that we have in town. They're not new things that we're doing. They're things that we already do in town. And so the idea is we would apply and see if they agree that we are a community that is promoting the building of affordable housing. They would give us a designation. We would be able to apply for grants. It's frequent. There are a lot of state programs that are like this.
Well, I mean, to me, it seems to me that we are saying that we're doing well on building 40B. And if you designate us to be in this particular category of towns, we are willing to do way more.
That's not the case. That's not the case. This isn't saying that we build 40Bs and are willing to build more 40Bs. That's not, again, it's about programs that we already have in place in town, like our housing production plan.
So I would request that we make an estimate of how much more extra dwellings we will need to support if this application goes through eventually, and we get grants, we do get grants. What's the eventual result of all this? Without knowing the final, where it's going, I think it'll be too early to decide on making this application.
Okay, great. Thank you. Again, I'll just say this does not require us in any way to build a certain number of units if we apply for this. There is no requirement in this application to do that.
Well, it's like this. This is like the frog in the hot water, right? This is how you get started. And once you get started, then I'll say, okay, you do a little bit more, you get more money, we give you more. And so we have been in the situation with 40B. So why don't we try to understand more before we make the application? So in particular, how many more dwellings we need to build of whatever category? Is that a requirement? For example, I heard that there is a requirement to designate parts of the town to be high density. And that really is worrisome to me because I live very close to the Kelly's Corner. I'm already seeing the result of that being higher density. So I don't want other places to be higher density, even the Kelly's Corner itself built to be higher density.
So again, this does not require us to designate certain areas of town to be higher density or to build a certain number of units by applying for this. If there are requirements for other grant programs in the future, or if this changes, we can talk about those. But this right now, this application does not require either of those things, so that's not true, just to be clear.
Well, that is possibly the case, but it doesn't alleviate my fear and many of the people who are in this area, because having seen this kind of development already, we are also very, very worried about this kind of development.
Okay, thank you for your comments.
Yep, thanks.
I will allow, if this is a new comment, I will allow that.
Yes, it is. So the new comment is that actually on the page where the application comes from, it says that the grants and the designation are to drive more construction, more growth, production, they call it. Thank you.
Okay, again, it doesn't require us to build anything more additional in order to participate in this program. Yes, ma'am.
I would also like to ask if your plan also includes how we address increased housing and the people who are moving into town and how that impacts the schools.
So this isn't a plan that we're putting forward. This is an application for a state grant program. It's not a plan that we're putting forward about how we are building more units or anything like that. We have a housing production plan, which you can find on our website, that talks about our efforts and goals towards affordable housing, but this in and of itself is not a plan that we are putting forward tonight.
Okay, I think that there's a lot of people in the audience here, though, that are feeling that even though this is not necessarily the plan, it's leading toward that.
Okay. Thank you for your comments. So we have a motion and a second. Are there any other comments or questions from board members? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, that passes. Thank you. Okay, and up next is the board to discuss recreational marijuana ballot question. So Janet, I will turn this back over to you, and Nina Pickering-Cook from Town Council's office will also be joining us in case folks have any questions, if board members have any questions for her.
Okay, I'm going to provide a quick overview, just focusing on what the board has to decide. We've gotten a fair number of emails from residents expressing their opinions, generally wanting a full-scale ban of recreational/adult marijuana in town, and also expressing concern about the draft host community agreement with one entity that is licensed to do medical marijuana. But I want to just keep the focus for this period. I want to keep it focused on what the board has to do. Let the board talk a little bit, because we really haven't had a chance to dig into the details of what we want to do. So first, we have to decide what local regulations we want to pursue. I inserted in our packet Concord's 2018 annual town meeting warrant articles pertaining to recreational marijuana. Concord ended up approving all three. Because I have a boring life, I ended up watching Concord's town meeting on video. So they approved the ban, and they also approved the proposed 3% tax surcharge, and they extended their moratorium from July to the end of this year. The next step in Concord is to schedule the ballot question, because they have to go through the same two-step process that we would have to do if that's what we wanted to do, either ban or restrict recreational marijuana establishments in town. But our options are, we can ban all recreational marijuana establishments, which means retail, growing, manufacturing, testing, all the rest, all the ones that are listed in the guidelines. We could adopt more limited restrictions, for example, limit the number of establishments below the minimum of 20%. I think it's of package store licenses. I understand we have 10 package store licenses, which means there would be a 2 minimum. We could just ban certain kinds of recreational marijuana establishments and allow, say, wholesale establishments. That's the first thing. We have to decide what kind of regulations we want to pursue. Then we also need clarification, and this is where council is going to have to assist, clarification of the impact on Mass Wellspring, which is the entity that has, for which there's a draft host agreement, community agreement in our packet. Whether by law, because Mass Wellspring secured provisional registration status as a medical marijuana establishment by July 1st of last year, the town must let Mass Wellspring apply for authorization to offer recreational marijuana retail services. And if the Cannabis Control Commission grants a license, allow Mass Wellspring to operate a retail recreational marijuana establishment, even if the town otherwise were to decide to ban all recreational marijuana establishments, or at least retail operations. So we have to decide what the impact is of what we do on Mass Wellspring. And if they have some sort of legally protected rights, we're going to have to account for that in what we do moving forward. And then if we had to allow Mass Wellspring to operate a retail operation, we're going to have to provide some sort of exception so that they can operate without running afoul of any other restrictions we might impose. And then the last question is, when should we be dealing with the host agreement? I think that we need to establish where we want to go with just our proposed regulations, all the other things that we need to talk about before we deal with the host agreement. And I understand that it's now, you started out being a requirement for just recreational, but council can correct me as to whether it's now required for medical marijuana establishments as well. But until we're clear on what we want to do with Mass Wellspring in general and our general regulations about recreational marijuana, then I think that we need to put a hold on what we do with the host agreement. I don't know. The other question I had is, does our moratorium, which is effective through the end of the year, preclude us, or should we just respect the moratorium and not do anything other than to say, put something on the ballot about a ban? Or should we start looking at what, beyond the end of the moratorium to what we need to do next? And then the last thing we have to talk about, okay, what we want to, how we want to regulate, to what the impact is on Mass Wellspring, and then finally is the implementation of whatever it is we want to do, if it's a ban or restrictions. We have to schedule a special town meeting, and we have to have, meet the deadline for the state ballot question, and somebody, presumably council, has to draft appropriate language. The last thing, there is one last thing, is public outreach. It's my understanding from council, I don't have a dog in this fight, a horse in this race. I really, I think that I don't necessarily want to endorse one position or the other, but we obviously have the option of inviting advocates for different positions to provide public information, and maybe with somebody, either council or somebody from the Cannabis Control Commission, or somebody who's sort of balanced, maybe there to keep order and make sure that people are dealing in facts and not sort of rumors and misrepresentations and innuendo. So anyhow, with that, I will turn it over to you for probably clarification of sort of what we're dealing with legally and what are sort of, especially what the impact is of whatever rights Mass Wellspring has on what we do.
Sure. So for those that don't know, I'm Nina Pickering Cook from Town Council's office. I have not prepared a presentation on this topic for you, but I'm happy to answer any questions. With respect specifically to Mass Wellspring, the issue is, as I understand it, they received a provisional license as an RMD and now would like to convert to an adult use establishment. And the question is, what effect does the moratorium have, and what effect would any subsequent limitations have, including a ban? As with anything that has come forth from the legislature or the voters with respect to marijuana, this is not an incredibly clear answer or issue to resolve. The Cannabis Control Commission has come out with their opinion on this question. And their opinion on this question is that the town, with its moratorium in place, that moratorium would apply to an RMD converting to an adult use establishment. Similarly, any subsequent ban would apply to an RMD converting to an adult use establishment. There is guidance language which also states in statutory language which states that the town zoning bylaws or ordinances cannot operate so as to prevent that conversion. The Cannabis Control Commission, my understanding, has interpreted that to mean the time, place, and manner restrictions that may come in place with zoning bylaws, if adult use is allowed but regulated, could not operate to prevent the conversion of an RMD. But that is different than a wholesale moratorium or ban. That is the Cannabis Control Commission's interpretation of the statute. that is all we have to go on at this point. However, that certainly could be subject to legal challenge. I know those are words you all love to hear.
Yes, having been subject to many legal challenges.
So that is where we stand with respect to clarification as it may be on any moratorium or ban on the mass wellspring. With respect to how to deal with the host community agreement. Again, the certification that there is a host community agreement is required in order for Mass Wellspring's application to be complete with the state. There is no requirement in the statute for the town to sign that. There is no time period with which the town is required to review it or respond in any way. The moratorium that Acton put in place was put in place to allow the town time and space to deal with these questions and to figure out the appropriate avenue forward for your town. But again, people are in somewhat uncharted territory as far as what would happen if the town just decided not to engage with Mass Wellspring with respect to their host community agreement, if the rest of their application is ready and ready to go and pending with the Cannabis Control Commission. So again, uncharted legal territory on that. I think that was it as far as specific questions for me. I'm happy to answer questions from any of the rest of you as questions are posed to you from the public.
Great, thank you, Nina. Okay, I'll take initial questions and comments from board members. So does anybody want to have any? Joan?
Does this host community agreement position Mass Wellspring for recreational?
Yes, my understanding is this is the final piece in their application to convert their RMD to an adult use establishment. They certainly can correct me, but that's my understanding.
Any other questions? John?
I think it would be fairly safe to say the moratorium in place through the end of the year would allow us to take no action on the Wellspring request for us to act on a host agreement. Is that a fair comment?
There is no law or regulation or guidance which puts a time limit on your review of that agreement. That is not to say that Mass Wellspring might be infinitely patient with the town. They have their own lawyers who are giving them advice, I'm sure, on their options. But there is nothing in the law that tells me that you, the town, need to take action before December 31st.
All right, so I would put before the board that we take no action on their draft proposed host agreement.
Are you making that as a motion, or you just want to get a sense?
I want a sense of the group.
Second.
Well, can we talk first about what we're going to do? I mean, other than the host agreement, I mean, there's a bigger issue of regulation and whether we're going to have a special town meeting and a ballot question about restrictions.
Yeah, I mean, I think they are all issues we need to talk about. So I think you're saying, at least in terms of the host agreement, John, that you would suggest we take no action on the host agreement, at least for now. Do you have an opinion on kind of the other steps in terms of regulations, if we want to put a ban forward or a partial ban?
Sure, I would favor going to the two-step process, the town meeting and the town-wide election for the ban that just basically extend the moratorium into a ban to cover, all aspects of adult recreational marijuana, both the retail sales and the cultivation, fertilization, et cetera, with the exception of medical marijuana. And I think it was the moratorium and the non-binding resolution were both consistent with each other in that respect. It was sort of full-blown across the board with the medical marijuana exception.
Okay.
So
Joan-
I would favor that.
Okay, Joan, do you have thoughts on those issues?
Yeah, I think I agree with John at this point.
Okay. Peter?
No, I would agree. I have a question for Nina. But is this, where is this in the process? I mean, if there were ever to be a host agreement signed today, which isn't going to happen, but is that the end of the process? They basically then just go back to the commission and the commission issues a license within a short period of time? Or is there more steps they have to go through?
I have no idea how quickly the commission acts. My understanding, based on a representation from Mass Wellspring, is that this is the final piece of their application. So once they could certify that the town and Mass Wellspring had come to an agreement, their application would be complete, and they are starting to license adult use and establishments now.
Okay.
I don't know how long the process is. Perhaps Mass Wellspring knows more about that than I do. But it's certainly possible that a license would be issued prior to the effect of or outcome of any town meeting or ballot. But
I thought the commission was saying they weren't going to issue any licenses if there was a moratorium in town.
correct. So if they are seeking to convert, the moratorium can apply to them. I think that there might be a question if the host community agreement was signed by the town while the moratorium was in place, as well as while a ban was being enacted. I think there would be a question there, as certainly from the commission's mind, of what the town was intending by entering into that agreement while the moratorium was in place and ban was being proposed.
Okay, I mean, I have previously come out in favor of putting this on the November ballot, and we would, I assume, have a special town meeting at the same time. The reason I really asked that question is because Wellspring has argued to the town that they need this host agreement in place in case the voters turn down the ban of marijuana, recreational marijuana shops in town, that they would then have this host agreement in place and could move forward. It seems to me Wellspring could wait until November, and if the ban gets turned down, move forward pretty quickly at that point anyway, and maybe even before the end of the year when the moratorium is in place too anyway. So I don't see any harm to Wellspring, and I have a lot of questions about the host agreement, what other conditions the town could ask for even if we were to enter into it, but I don't see any reason to move forward with it now. I do agree we should get as much information as we can about zoning, limiting the number of stores, other actions we can take so that when the voters come to town meeting, we can explain to them all of their options.
Nina, did you want to add something?
Yeah, just one point, Peter, in response to your recitation of Mass Wellspring's concern. If the concern is being properly positioned in the event that either the ballot or the town meeting vote fails, I think that's something as lawyers we can certainly draft around as far as making the agreement only effective in the event that adult use marijuana establishments are permitted in town. So that's something, if that's a concern, we may be able to draft around that.
Thank you. Janet?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, one of the things I didn't include Concord's slide presentations, but I think it's the presentation for the article about the extension of the moratorium to the end of this year. included a presentation in which they had a map. I guess a planning department or somebody had mapped out all of the areas in town where, based on just the kinds of businesses that were allowed, I mean, whether it's retail, manufacturing, agriculture, testing, all that, where recreational marijuana related establishments could go. And it kind of, well, it was kind of amusing because there were people who were near the hospital. They live in Newburyport, which is where my mother lives, and there was a woman saying, oh my goodness, they could have a pot shop right next door to, where she was living, and that wasn't the case. But I thought that to the extent that we start to look at zoning, we probably need to have the planning department provide us with a sense of if one or the other of the votes failed and we had to turn around and quickly manage what we had, I assume we would want some sort of alternative approach, be ready with something to take effect at the end of the moratorium if the ban votes, one or the other, didn't succeed. So, I don't know if Roland Barrell I did talk to, and he said that to the extent that it was allowable in town, then, the best approach would be, he recommended a site plan permit process, and I thought, oh gosh, involving the Board of Selectmen, no thanks. But I think that it's obviously something that we need to think about going forward. If perchance there weren't a ban, what kind of restrictions would we want? Because I assume we would want some limitations.
Nina?
Thank you, Madam Chair. In thinking about those contingency plans, I think it's worthwhile to think about planning for this fall with respect to where the town meeting should fall vis-a-vis the ballot. Technically, either vote can come first as long as they kind of identically match. However, if you're going to it may make sense if you're going to have a contingency plan as a zoning warrant article that come after the ballot, because you will know at that town meeting when you're voting what the outcome will be. Otherwise, you're voting subject to a later result of an election, which does happen.
Yep, okay, so I personally am inclined also to put the ban on the November ballot. Again, my concerns earlier were just about having it on a local election, and I would support putting it on the November ballot, but I agree with Janet that would make sense to have perhaps some backup options so that if the ballot vote did fail, or we could hopefully structure it at town meeting that the ballot or that the ban vote would come first, and if that vote failed, because if the ballot vote passes but the town meeting vote on the ban fails, then the ban is not in place, correct? They both have to. So just having those backups, I think we did something similar with nursing where we sort of, if one passed, then we passed over other things. And so I think it would make sense to have that backup of what zoning would look like and what kind of limitations we would want. So perhaps, Janet, we could designate you to work with planning on thinking about that and have them come back at the future Board of Selectmen meeting to talk about what some of those backup options might be. I also thought it was good that Concord had put in place adopting the sales tax in case in the future they no longer ban the retail, because I think, again, it's good just to have everything in place if that does change in the future. And then I think it also gives people a sense of, well, if we voted no on the ban, what are the other options? And we would be able to kind of lay that all out. So that's sort of where I am. I agree with Peter that I don't think we need to move forward with the host community agreement until we know the outcome of a ban. I get your point, Nina, that we could put language in there that it only takes effect if we were to not ban this. But to me, I think we would have time between November and the end of the moratorium to handle that. So I'm not overly concerned with that. So those are my general thoughts. Mr. Town Manager?
I just wanted to just let the board know, because we know we've talked about the November election, and I talked to Michelle Tassinari today, who's the Chief Legal Counsel for the Secretary of State's office, just to get clear how that would work. And what she was saying is, in essence, we have to have a separate ballot. It's almost like 2 elections, 2 separate check-ins. I don't know, probably not that much more work for the town clerk. I'm not really sure. She's out sick. The advantage of doing it on the November election is that the early voter would actually kick in for the local, which I think is a real advantage. Because it's a federal election with Congress, et cetera, on the ballot, under federal law, the ballot has to be ready to be mailed out 45 days before the election, so it can go overseas, go to people in the service, et cetera. For a local, it's only 30 days, but she recommended we adhere to the same 45 days so we could get both ballots mailed out to people overseas and in the service. So I just wanted to make the board aware that originally I wasn't sure if we could have it all on one ballot, but it, in essence, is 2 separate, distinct elections held simultaneously.
Okay, but that would be, so 45 days is sometime in mid-September or sometime in September?
End of September sometime. She said it's always a Saturday.
Okay. Janet, you had a question?
So that's the deadline that we were talking about, is it's farther, it's later than, yeah, well, that's good, instead of July or August, but more time to figure out the language and all, so.
Okay.
Okay.
Are there any other questions or comments from board members? Okay, then I will open up to the public. Yes, sir. If you can just say your name and street, please.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Bill Beebe, Bellows Farm, 11 Longmeadow Way. Very interesting briefing by the Acton Police Department on Wednesday between 5 and 6 p.m. It was part of what they call the Acton Police Academy, which I've been attending. And they talked about the drug situation in Acton. We do have a drug situation in Acton. It's not a real bad one. It could get worse. I would recommend that you talk with the Acton Police Department to find out where we are in our drug situation, particularly with respect to high school kids right now. Okay, it's an input that I think you need to have. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
I'm Chetan Vidhate from Patriots Neighborhood. I would like to add one thing. There is a legislation pending, bill number H4284. This is from the guidance for the municipalities from CCC website. So that bill specifically talks about conversion from medical use to adult use, local control over that process, and seed to sale tracking system. So I would like to mention that as well.
Great, thank you. And I think we saw your email on that as well, so thank you. Yes, Angie.
Hi, Angie So, Bellows Farm. So just want to thank you for putting a hold on the host agreement, and but I want to clarify on the process. So is there like a timeline, or what's, can somebody give me just a general guideline, what's starting from now till November?
Sure, so it sounds like in order to put something on the ballot, which it seems like the majority of the board is inclined to do, we would need to have that language all set by 45 days or before the election, which seems to be sometime in mid to late September. So between now and then, I think the board needs to work with council to come up with what that language would be. And it also sounds like at least some of us would be inclined to look at alternatives in case the ballot or town meeting vote fails. So unless she declines or members of the board feel otherwise, you probably will designate Janet to continue looking into that and working with the planning department and others, and to come back before the board sometime before September to talk about what alternative warrant articles we might want to put on a special town meeting in sometime after November, the November election.
So will it be based on the Article 6 ballot question language?
I mean, I don't think we'll use that language directly, but we, we'll work with council on what the language would be in terms of a ban.
Okay. So I just want to clarify some question. It is my understanding the host community agreement for the medical and adult use, they are 2 separate entities. In 2015 July meeting, the Mass Wellspring, they come and they get the medical marijuana host agreement. I just want to read from the meeting minutes. This is from the Board of Selectmen meeting minutes. So basically, when they came and they will operate or offer mostly home delivery versus walk-ins. So this is when they apply for the medical host agreement. And in terms of the adult use host agreement, what you said is true. The only piece they're missing right now is the host agreement for the adult use from the town, for the municipality, then can kick off the application process. And actually, as of April 18th, Mass Wellspring, they are on the priority certification process, which means they are on an expedited process already. So I thank you for the board and not putting, because there's really a lot of ambiguity at this point, and honor the moratorium and allow the ballot question. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Janet.
Angie, you kept referring to a host agreement in 2015. There was no host agreement with Mass Wellspring in 2015. We issued a letter of non-opposition, which is a very different thing.
Okay, thank you for clarification.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I'm Chetan Vidate from Patriot's Neighborhood. So basically, marijuana establishment just needs 3 documents from municipalities. First is community outreach meeting. Second is documentation of compliance with the local laws. And third is host community agreement. So for the first community outreach meeting, it is my understanding that Mass Wellspring is planning for the second meeting, because the first meeting they couldn't show the location. That basically, that is the requirement. So is that understanding correct? Second is, for the documentation of compliance, it is written in the regulation that there is a 60 days deadline at the after the town receives the application. So if we go into host community agreement, and if town receives the application, town has to respond to commission within 60 days, otherwise it is considered as compliant. So this point should be considered before going into any host agreement. And third point about the host community agreement, we heard their business proposal on the medical marijuana business. We haven't heard any impact, benefits, employment details, and other things for the adult use marijuana. So that, in my opinion, also should be considered. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Good evening. I'm Dr. Stephanie Lipton. I'm the president and CEO of Mass Wellspring. And I thank the Board of Selectmen for allowing me this opportunity to speak tonight, and I'm happy to answer any questions, because I'm sure there are many questions. There are a few things that I would like to state about the adult use marijuana program. This is an issue of choice for people in Massachusetts. Twice now, the residents of Acton have voted in favor of cannabis access, both medical and adult use. And now there's a minority group within the town of Acton that is trying to get a third bite at the apple. And this minority contingent who helped to get passage of a potential ban ballot question represented less than 5% of the registered Acton voters. So less than 5% of your registered voters showed up to that meeting, and I believe it was about 70% of them that voted in favor of banning. So that's hardly a representation of the town and what they wish. A second issue is that Concord has no medical marijuana dispensary, nor do I know of any group that is planning on moving in there. And it's my understanding that the town of Concord, the residents there, did not vote for adult use cannabis. The residents of Acton did vote for adult use cannabis. So there's a very big difference between the town of Acton and the town of Concord. I think the town of Newton is a little bit more reflective of the town of Acton in that they do have a medical marijuana dispensary there. The town of Newton did impose a moratorium. However, they exempted the existing dispensary because that dispensary has proven that they have jumped through all the hoops required by the Department of Health, and that includes ensuring security and safety of the community. So this is a many years process of installing security features and going through query checks. And because they've gone through that, they were exempted by their own town. And initially when I met with Steve Ledoux and Selby a few weeks ago, we asked if it was possible for the town of Acton to exempt us from the moratorium because we have already received our final certificate of registration from the Department of Health. And that means that we have implemented all of the security features. So we're up and we're ready to go, and we're planning on opening our dispensary within a few weeks. So I think it's more appropriate to look at a town like Newton than a town like Concord that has always outright tried to ban any form of medical or recreational cannabis. I also want to emphasize, I'm a mom. First and foremost, I'm a mom. I'm a veterinarian, but I'm also a mom. I also have a degree, a master's degree in psychology, and I have studied addiction, and I have been providing grief counseling, free grief counseling for 25 years, so I'm very familiar with what drugs can do to people, do to families. I have an uncle that was a drug addict, so I'm fully aware, and especially being a mom, I am incredibly sensitive about the issue of diversion to children. I have 2 children in high school. I started this process 6 years ago when they were in elementary school. So all through that time, I have been talking to them about not using cannabis. I have talked to them about staying away from things like alcohol, cigarettes, and cannabis, because there is the potential that with heavy use of cannabis, it can affect the development of the brain. I know in our public school system, there is a big problem with kids smoking pot. And I can tell you the 2 kids that don't smoke pot in our high school are my kids, because they have no interest in touching this stuff because I've spoken to them. We have this conversation frequently, ad nauseum, as they would say. And when I mention it again, they roll their eyes. Not again, Mom, we've heard it. They know. And so if children are getting this, it is a failure of parenting. It's a failure of parenting if children are getting a hold of alcohol or cannabis. If you want to prevent diversion of cannabis to children, the best thing you can do is have a regulated dispensary sell that cannabis. Because if people start growing it in their homes, there's no easier way for a child to get access to it. They only have to go in there and pick off a little piece and no one would notice. And if you have one plant in your house, you're advertising to the entire neighborhood that you are growing cannabis because that one plant emits so much odor, it will come right out your house as soon as you open a window or a door. So if you really are interested in preventing children from getting a hold of cannabis, you support an adult use dispensary in your community. Because not only is that cannabis regulated in terms of the amount and what's sold, it has to be organic. It cannot have any fungicides, herbicides, or pesticides in it. It cannot have any heavy metals in it. And every single batch is tested by an independent lab. So if you're going to purchase a product, you want to make sure that what you are ingesting is safe to use. And you also want to know what's in that product. So every single container that contains the cannabis has to have a cannabinoid profile so you know exactly what is in that product. And we provide education for people coming into the dispensary. The education includes what the best cannabis is for what conditions, if it's medical, or if you have insomnia and you don't want to go to a doctor and pay $200 to get a prescription and then another $50 to register with the state and then be on a state registry. So we can provide this information for people, and we're also providing information for parents on how to have a conversation with your kids to keep cannabis away from them. I think many of these people that oppose it have probably never had that conversation. I know on their website, there's no information about how parents can talk to their kids about cannabis. It's all about false information and scare tactics. And they are promoting fake research and research results. And that is dangerous. A few months ago, the Department of Health came to our dispensary to do one of their inspections, and we have passed every inspection so far with flying colors. And the head of inspections at the Department of Health told me that the police had just arrested a gentleman who was calling himself a caregiver for patients with cancer. And in the marijuana that he was selling them, he was putting lead shavings in it to weigh it down so he could increase his profit margins. This is what happens on the black market when you don't know what's in it and it is not regulated. So now you have cancer patients smoking marijuana with a carcinogen. And that's not what we want for our community. And we don't want that for our families either. So these kids are getting their cannabis from the black market. They're not getting it from any of these dispensaries. I have seen no information posted anywhere about diversion from these medical marijuana dispensaries or break-ins at these dispensaries because they're so highly secured. If you want your kids to take street drugs and they're buying marijuana, it can have fentanyl in it because that's happened out in Revere. It can have heroin, PCP in it. You have no idea. But if you purchase it from a regulated dispensary, you don't have any of those issues. So this is a matter of choice. I have the right, I have a choice if I want to drink alcohol, or if I want to discontinue chemotherapy, or if I want to terminate a pregnancy. And in this state, I have the choice to consume cannabis because it is legal in this state. And this vocal minority is out there spreading misinformation, and they are organized. And they were organized enough to convince you to put a ban on the ballot. And to me, that's dangerous, because that's a third bite at that apple. And that is not what the people of Acton wanted. And I think you all know very well that there's a very strong likelihood that many voters will not show up in November like they did in the presidential election to vote. So you're not going to have the same number of people, and it was a narrow margin. So this is precisely what this group is banking on, that they will get so motivated and turn out to vote, but the rest of the community who are pro-cannabis, they may not even know about it. I met two people out in the waiting room. They had no idea any of this was going on, and they were pro-cannabis. They had no idea.
So, Dr. Lipton, I'd ask if you could wrap up your comments.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yes. So I'm happy to answer any questions. I would ask that if you are considering a ban on the November ballot, that it not be an outright ban, that it we are in favor of restricting cannabis businesses. I have no problem with that. As a mother, I would not want a cannabis store on every corner. I think that allowing people access to cannabis is the fair thing. That's what Acton voted for. And if you restrict the number, I think that's adequate. That is exactly what other towns are doing. And that is what Lowell and Ayer are doing. They don't have a moratorium, and they are going to restrict adult use by limiting the number and the zoning. And that's what I'm asking you to do. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Yes, ma'am.
Hi. My name is Kim Lam, which is from the Tangsong Road. I'm the Acton resident here. So first of all, that I also want to share that I was trained as a social worker, and I work in the Department of Psychiatry in a hospital over 15 years. And so being a mom with a high school kid also. So we share the similar stuff, but we share also different experience. So first of all, that is being the Acton resident, I thank you that to give a chance for us to vote in December. Although some people will say it's a small percentage, but I think that the town already put a lot of effort, at least to encourage people to go out to express their opinion. People choose to go out to express opinion, that means the opinion also really will be listened. And I'm glad that the opinion being listened, and over, which is 1,300 residents, we come out to vote, and we wait for hours. And I think this is the one no one will forget about that situation. And I really appreciate we continue to honor and respect our vote and have that ballot. And number two is I think that it is really true that they talk about the education to the teenager. And I wish I was in that situation, can teach my kid for 6 years. Unfortunately, the teenager in our town don't have that kind of situation to receive education, talk about the recreational marijuana for several years. And while that kind of establishment, it will come up very soon. So I think that it talk about the situation is whether our teenagers are well prepared. Is it our education to our parents how to teach our kids, and also teach our teenagers about to have a better choice? Is it have enough education? Is any readiness? This question is, what is readiness? Before we have this the recreation establishment in the town. And so I think I really appreciate also, please keep our ballot, which is in November. This is opportunity for the resident, our town resident, to come out to vote. This is the stuff belong our town. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Yes, I'm Ping Liu at Ave Development Place. So Dr. Stephanie Lipton, mentioned a few times. So in 2016, so 2/3 voted for legal marijuana and 1/3 voted no. So basically, she mentioned a few times, likely that 1/3 is a bad apple. So I checked basically, I'm reading the data here. So the vote yes is 66-41 votes. The number voted no is 6,097. So basically, the difference is 550. 500 less than 10%. And also, there are over 2,000, basically, over 2,000 people didn't vote for it. So basically, they didn't care. That means basically it's a 1-to-1 ratio, not like a 2/3 voted for it and 1/3 voted no. And the democratic process in America, will like every person with different opinion, just say it, vote for it. So the voting process is an equal opportunity for everyone. So we need to let people, basically every voter in Acton, just vote, yes or no to ban or not. So November vote is very important. So I like, board selectmen, most people prefer, basically voted yes to put on the ballot, in November. That's a great decision. So thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Corinne Hogseth. I live on Seminole Road. Concord was actually a yes town, and it's one of 17 towns that so far that were yes towns that have put bans in place. There are dozens more yes towns with moratoria, and certainly some of them are just working on bylaws, but others are certainly working on bans. So I just wanted to correct that. And again, I thank you for what sounds like an inclination to take no action on the host community agreement while bylaws are still being considered. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Jill Schaefer, also with Mass Wellspring. So I just want to clarify a couple terms. Mass Wellspring's application to the CCC is actually to co-locate. We are an RMD. We're not technically converting to adult use. We're asking to co-locate. To that end, the host community agreement is just a procedural requirement to submit the application. There needs to be a one-page certification that Mass Wellspring and the town have agreed to the terms of the host community agreement. It's just a procedure, it's not binding. it allows us to go through with the process that the CCC has clearly said, you are a priority applicant because you already are an RMD. You should be the first to be considered. So we are listed first in that group to be considered, but we do need at least the terms agreed to with the town, just so that we can go forward. If the town decides to ban, which, you guys will do all your deliberations and make your decisions, we are just asking for the ability to follow the process that the CCC has designated to us. The fact that it is contingent upon your approval, that's just the way it is. I mean, that's similar to how the letter of non-opposition was back when the medical marijuana regulations came out. So in light of that, I just wanted to clarify that no matter what happens, if the host community agreement is agreed to now, all we do is follow our application process. It just permits us to go through the process. It doesn't affect the town's ability to ban. It doesn't affect the town's decision to put whatever they want on the ballot. It really just lets us, as an RMD that you've already approved in your town, to go through the process that the CCC has dictated.
Thank you.
Any questions?
So I get to ask a few
Okay,
more
well, they
questions.
know.
But if they do, I'll bring you back up, but thank you very much. Yeah, Angie?
Yeah, Angie from Balance Fund. Just to clarify, I'm reading from the Cannabis Control Municipal Guidance. So in there, it said very clearly the commission encouraged municipalities to carefully consider the impact of the particular marijuana establishments proposed for a community. And also call the attorney office at for the municipal law unit. I talked to Margaret Hurley, and she has clarified that the municipality has the right to decide whether the issue or not, and it's the awfully right of the community to decide whether it's the best for the community. Thank you very much. Just want to clarify that.
Great, thank you. Tara?
Tara Fredericks, West Acton. First of all, I want to say that I'm totally in favor of pot stores. I think pot's really good for people if they want it. I believe the kids are getting it anyway, and with the remark about getting it in safe places, I totally respect that. But that said, I have a great affinity, duty to protect the right to petition. The Massachusetts Constitution guarantees the right to alter government, and the petition process is put in place to allow that. So I'm here to defend the petition, which is overwhelmingly voted on at town meeting, and I have some questions. The petition referred to recreation only, right?
Are you talking about the petition that was in
Sorry, the town meeting petition.
The town meeting article? Yes, I believe so.
And the what these guys are doing is proceeding towards medical.
What Wellspring has approval for a medical dispensary,
right.
Correct.
But the moratorium is for recreational.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, our moratorium's on recreational. John, you have to use your microphone.
As to how it's defined, I believe the marijuana establishment goes to cultivator.
That's all related to recreational marijuana, right? Not medical.
That was my question, yes.
So it covers more than just recreational sales, it covers cultivation.
Right, all recreational marijuana, yep.
That's under the umbrella.
Yes.
Of recreational only.
So that was in just to be clear, that was what was in the warrant article at town meeting.
The moratorium.
For the moratorium.
Correct.
Article 5.
The ban that you guys seem to be agreeing upon, that's just for recreational.
Right, we're not voting to ban medical marijuana, correct?
And the idea of having a vote at the ballot as well as a vote at town meeting, a special town meeting, is that also just to ban recreational.
Correct, so we would be required to have a two-step process where the ban would have to be approved both at the ballot and at town meeting.
Okay, so the host agreement that you've been talking about, the one has already been signed for
We have not
medical.
signed a host agreement. We have
For
not
the
signed-
medical.
We have not signed a host
You have
agreement.
not signed the host agreement
There
for
is no
medical.
host agreement related to medical dispensaries. We signed a letter of non-opposition
Oh, I
that was
see.
part of their application. There's no host agreement related to medical marijuana.
And the same for the other one that was in here.
Correct. There's no host agreement for medical marijuana. That's not part of the
Right.
medical marijuana approval
So
process.
effectively, you could stop both these operations by not signing the host agreement.
No,
No.
again, there's not a host agreement related to medical marijuana, so we've.
Oh, you don't
approved-
need one?
Right.
Oh, okay, sorry. So that proceeds along, and the recreational side, you're trying to decide whether you draft a host agreement, a letter of non-opposition, is that right?
No.
It's a host agreement on the recreational side, while you wait to see the aspects of the town.
Right, we have, Mass Wellspring has sent us a draft host agreement, but we have decided, or right now, it seems that the sense of the board is not to move forward with approving that host agreement while we wait the results of a November ballot initiative as well as the town meeting.
Okay, and then the ballot, when it goes on the ballot, there's a notification to people get the booklet in the mail the same way that we usually get?
Yes, it's a little
And
much.
is it the same day as
Yes.
the other vote?
Yes.
I heard this whole thing about the different ballot papers, you have to take two
So
papers.
generally, this happens all the time, where sometimes you essentially have two elections in one, where you're just given two ballots when you go to vote at one election. So if you're
Okay.
going to vote on, I want to say November 8th, but that's not the right date, whatever the date in November is for the federal election, you'd be given the ballot that has all of the people you're, electing, and then a separate one with a question that we will draft.
So what question is still open relative to the ban?
The
ballot
ban itself.
question?
We have the wording of the
Oh,
ballot
just the wording.
question.
Okay, thank you.
Well, we haven't actually voted as a board whether or not to put it on the ballot, so I assume we would wait till, right now we have a sense of the board that that's the direction we would want to go. So I think we would pursue with having council draft a ballot question that then we will come back and discuss as a board and vote as to whether or not to put it on the ballot. And we have to make that decision by mid-September.
And the draft language of that would be available to the public before the discussion about the language?
Right, it'd be in our packet. as
Okay,
any of
thank you.
these. One quick thing, yes.
I just wanted the board to understand that there is physically no difference between products that are sold as medical cannabis and products that are sold as adult use cannabis. They are physically the same products. The only difference is the person purchasing the products. The difference is, do they have to spend the money to see a doctor, pay money to get registered, and be on a state registry? Or can they just go in as an adult and purchase the products themselves? And I'd like to remind the board that your state senator, Jamie Aldridge, is in favor of adult use cannabis. Thank you.
Thank
Can
you.
I
Peter, do you
ask
have a question?
quick question? So when you say you're going to co-locate, you say these products are basically the same thing.
Right.
Is there going to be a separation?
There has to be.
In your plan?
Yes.
Between medical and
Yeah.
residential?
Yes, and the Cannabis Commission isn't very clear.
Recreational, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I understand. The Cannabis Commission isn't very clear on just how distinct that separation needs to be. So they have, the Department of Health believes that if you just have a separate lane or a separate room for medical users versus a larger area of a counter, then that should be sufficient. But there does have to be a separation between adult use and the medical community.
Two ends of a counter, you're saying?
Well, that can constitute it. We also have a consultation room, so that could be the area where we consult with the patients. We educate them on their choices, and then we can help them purchase the products in there if they decide that they want privacy.
Okay, and I think when you came before us for the non-opposition letter, you were focusing on deliveries, right? Like
Yeah.
95% deliveries or
No, we
something
didn't give a
like that?
percentage, but yeah, the majority is going to be, we're going to be primarily delivery service. That's what, and we're hoping to do that with adult use at some point. But I think I mentioned to you before that My feeling is if you're a patient, you shouldn't have to go out to get your medicine. Your medicine should come to you. Your pharmacy should deliver to you, especially if you're not feeling well.
Okay.
And I feel very strongly about this. And we also have a program for the indigent and the underserved community so that they can afford to purchase cannabis or to get it for free, depending on, if they're veterans, if they're children under the age of 17 with Dravet syndrome. So we have a whole variety of options for low income and the underserved community. And we're hoping that with the adult use, we're able to fund more of that, because we're also going to be doing research. I'm supposed to be submitting information to a researcher at Texas A&M because the veterinary community needs information on how we can dose animals, and there's absolutely no information anywhere about this. And in all 50 states, it's illegal to prescribe for dogs and cats, which is insane if you think about that.
Okay, and you also emphasized the security of this, and I think the chief was here and was saying, this is not going to. He agrees with the security plan, but it was everybody who's registered for medical marijuana has to show an ID and prove that they're registered before they can get in your store. So if you co-locate with recreational people, is that all out the window? Anybody can come in who wants to buy marijuana?
No, I think the difference is if you're a medical marijuana patient and you show your card, you're not taxed on the products. So there's still security. You need to show a driver's license, a valid form of ID. And if you're a medical patient, you can show your card and you're not required to pay the tax on the products.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. All right, seeing nobody else standing, it sounds to me like we have a sense of the board that the board would like to go forward with putting a ban on the ballot in November, as well as a ban at the special town meeting that would follow the ballot vote, and that we would also like to look at alternatives in case to zoning or other issues in case the ban does fail. So I don't think we need to take any votes tonight, but I would like to say that I'd like us to come back hopefully in June or July with the draft ballot, as well as perhaps the alternatives. So we can talk about, Janet, I can talk with you about kind of moving that forward. So
And I'm fine with being the point person on it.
You said the special town meeting would follow the ballot?
Correct.
I mean, that's not necessary, and we usually have special town meetings in October. One alternative would be to have several warrant articles on a town meeting, one ban, one zoning, one limit numbers in town, rather than having one special town meeting for certain purposes and another one after the election for other.
No, I think the idea would be to have just one special town meeting that would be after November, but I think Nina was recommending doing the town meeting after the vote, because if the vote fails at the ballot, then we would pass over that article on the ballot or on the town meeting warrant. But I think that if it failed at town meeting, it would still be on the ballot, even though it would be sort of moot at that point. But it just timing wise, it probably makes more sense to do it. But we just have one town meeting. I don't think there are any issues that we have to get done before November. Okay, any other questions or concerns?
So for our timeline, we're looking at pulling a ballot question together June, July time period?
Yes, yeah, so that's my suggestion, is hopefully we'll schedule something in a June or July meeting to talk about draft ballot language as well as maybe draft warrant article language, if we're that far. Okay, great, excellent, thank you everybody. Okay, I think we are down to the consent agenda, so I will read through these. Please say hold if you would like to hold anything. And thank you, Nina, very much for coming tonight, unless you want to stay for this. Number 7, spending approval, Housing and Economic Development Implementation Grant Program, Acton Community Housing Corporation. Number 8, Acton Boxborough Farmers Market Lease Agreement. Number 9, right-of-way construction permits. Number 10, accept gift Council on Aging. Accept a gift of an undisclosed amount from the state of Paulo A. Pierce Jr. to the Council on Aging Gift Fund. Number 11, accept gift Council on Aging, a gift totaling $50 from Fred and Ellie Bent in memory of Barbara Panza for building furnishings at the Senior Center. Number 12, accept gift Recreation Department, a fiscal gift of $500 and a product giveaway sampling valued at $2,300 from the Dunkin' Donuts Corporation. Number 13, accept gift planning department, gift totaling $17,320 from the Ave Development Corporation towards the sidewalk fund. Number 14, accept gift recreation department, a gift totaling $1,000 from ProTech Corporation to support the 2018 summer concert series and events. Number 15, accept gift recreation department, a gift totaling $100 from Leo Fochman for funding a new recreation facility and playground at Jones Field. Accept gift recreation department, a gift totaling $100 from Barbara Dowds for funding a new recreation facility and playground at Jones Field. Number 17, committee appointment, Thomas P. Beals, Board of Registrars. Number 18, committee appointment, Christine Simeone, full member, Cable Advisory Committee. Number 19, one-day alcoholic beverage license, Donna Lambert, Narra Park Junior, June 16th, 2018. Number 20, multiple one-day alcoholic beverage license, Boston Events, Narra Park. Number 21, one-day alcoholic beverage license, Tammy Govaya, Contemporary Arts International, Inc., May 6, 2018. Number 22, one-day alcoholic beverage license of Jenny Holmansky, Nagog Woods Clubhouse, May 12, 2018. Number 23, one-day alcoholic beverage license, Neshoba Valley Neighbors Club, Narra Park, June 24, 2018. Number 24, meeting minutes, February 26th through April 5th, 2018. Number 25, meeting minutes, December 2016 to March 2017. Number 26, accept gift Acton Fire Department, accept a steel shipping container valued at $5,000 from the Eagle Leasing Company. Number 27, request to dispose of obsolete items, Acton Memorial Library. Number 28, committee appointment, Doug Herrick to associate to full member on the Historical Commission. Number 29, Selectmen Committee appointment, Dave Marshall, full member on the Open Space Committee.
Move to approve consent agenda items 7 through 29.
Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Move to adjourn.
Anybody like to second that?
No, we're going to stay here all night.
I just need one of you to say second. Thank you. Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, thank you all.